Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Till Mets Do Us Part here on the Chop Sports Network. And of course, you can get this podcast wherever it is you listen to your podcast. It doesn't matter to us whether it's Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, all of those places and more. And now you can watch us. If you prefer to see us do this podcast, you can check out all these awesome graphics and our beautiful faces on our YouTube channel. So wherever it is you listen and or watch, make sure that you subscribe so that you never, ever, ever miss an episode. John Sapanaro out in Los Angeles, California. Matt Ibby Ibanez back in New Jersey. Ibby, how you feeling, man?
John, I'm feeling pretty well. Obviously, it was an eventful week, to say the least, since the last time we hit record with Lori Rubinson. A lot has gone on, so I can't wait to get into all of that. So let's just do that. I'm going to throw it back to you. Let's intro our guest, because, look, we got a lot to talk about, because a lot went on, like I just said. I want to get this guest on. I've been wanting to get him on for a while. He's here. Let's get things started. Intro him. Let's get it rolling.
Well, you know what, man? It's crazy because usually when we could talk about like, hey, yeah, this is the obvious thing to just banter about at the top of the show. There is I cannot believe, like, I feel like we've already done an episode on some of the things that have happened, because I can't believe they've all happened in the last like 2 or 3 calendar days, but whatever. Yes, let's get into it. Our guest this week, absolutely fantastic, from Metsmerized, Michael Mayer. Michael, welcome in. Thank you for doing the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys. Yeah, like you said, it's been a wild week. Ultimately, a bad loss today, but I mean, there's plenty of things that happened in the last week that were positive for the Mets.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, and I don't even, it's not that I want to gloss over today's loss. It's just, look, the Mets are playing well. The Mets are 18-9. By the time people listen to this tomorrow, today's loss is already going to be in the rearview mirror. The Mets are playing well. Good teams have losses like this. It kind of is what it is. What I want to talk about, and it's hard to pick. It is hard to pick, actually, what should be the leadoff topic of this show. So you know what? Since you're the guest, Mike, I'm just going to toss it to you. Would you rather talk about the combined no-hitter, or would you rather talk about the Mets releasing Robinson Cano? You pick.
I mean, I always like to stay positive, so let's talk about the Cano.
Let's talk about the Cano.
I like it.
I cannot believe it happened, and I'm just going to take it from this perspective. I cannot believe that there are some fans and some media members alike, Mike, that are saying that this isn't a big deal. It's always a big deal. Now, does it have the esteem of one guy going out there and pitching his ass off for 9 innings and getting a no-hitter? Clearly it does not. But people are brushing it under the rug as if it's like, who cares? It's a no-hitter. I think that's kind of absurd.
Yeah, I mean, it is absurd. I mean, just look at how the players responded to it. The post-game press conference, their celebration, everything that the players went through and have talked about. I mean, did they make it seem like this was just swept under the rug? No. It's a no-hitter. I don't care if 25 people pitched. A no-hitter is a no-hitter. Like you said, does it have the same steam that like Johan going out and pitching all 9 innings? No, of course it doesn't. But you're still talking about 5 guys going out there and pitching no-hit ball. And that's still impressive. Think about Diaz talking about the pressure that he knew was on him, because he was the only relievers that actually knew a no-hitter was going on. Which is kind of crazy. I mean,
it's nuts. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's kind of, I mean, for me, that's a big takeaway from this too, is Edwin Diaz finally having that moment with the Mets. Obviously he had a really bad first year. And he's been good since then with some blimps here and there. But I think that was kind of his signature moment with the Mets. He knew the no-hitter was going on, comes in, faces the heart of the Phillies lineup, and, I mean, completely dominates. It's tough.
He was so filthy. Unbelievable.
Yeah,
he really was.
He was elite Edwin Diaz. He was Seattle Mariners Edwin Diaz in that inning, and it couldn't have come in a bigger spot to this point in his career.
Yeah, and I'd like to talk about Edwin Diaz specifically coming off of that moment in a moment from now, but I want to throw it over to you, Ibby. I think that in a way, kind of to Michael's point, sometimes a combined no-hitter might be, in a weird way, more impressive than a single guy who's out there. You see it all the time. You're like, did the guy know he had no-hit stuff? Yeah, in the bullpen, the catcher was like, wow, your stuff is spot on today. I mean, the Mets got an inning from Joely Rodriguez.
Clean inning, yeah.
A clean inning from Joely Rodriguez during this no-hitter. So, to have guys come in, you don't know what you're going to get. And look, I know Lugo's had an up and down year. I know, Drew Smith's been really, really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
Joely Rodriguez, coin flip. We already talked about the potential of Edwin Diaz, of which version of him are you going to get on a given night? And Tyler McGill has been fantastic. But when you look at it, it's almost more impressive in a way to see these guys come in and no one skips a beat.
Yeah, the fact that you have to have 5 guys on or 4 guys on, whatever it may be, at a given try for a no-hitter that we've seen over the years, but specifically in this spot, everyone has to be on within that moment. And the fact that people were complaining about this, well, I hope people are, going to continue this same vibe going forward, because guess what? The more no-hitters that you see moving forward in this baseball that we know now, guess what? You're going to see it more times like this as opposed to one guy going out there, because unless the guy's going out there and he is really on and he's going to eclipse maybe just over 100 pitches, you're not going to see a lot of guys go out there doing no-hitters anymore, because you're going to see multiple guys watching their innings pitch, watching the amount of pitches that's being thrown. So people better start getting used to the idea of no-hitters being done by multiple pitchers as opposed to one guy. But for me, I loved it. I was for it. I'm not one of these people that's complaining about it. The fact that people are, I don't understand it. It doesn't make any sense. Embrace it. It's a big moment. It's the second Mets no-hitter in history. Have some fun with it, people. Come on.
Absolutely. And when you look at everything that happened with Kershaw a couple weeks ago, getting pulled from the perfect game, and I understand you want Kershaw healthy for the long haul. You want him to be able to pitch all the innings he can pitch, and he's had arm trouble and all this stuff lately, blah, 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 blah. But Kershaw is not a guy who is in the prime of his career anymore. Kershaw's the guy that you would push. A couple of years ago, even, they would say, screw it, push him out there. Perfect game is a perfect game. You got to go for it. Come hell or high water. Either his arm's going to fall off, he's going to get it, or he's going to give up a hit, and then we can pull him with 200 pitches. Who cares? And I'm not saying that that's necessarily the way to go. I just mean you're 100% right. More of this stuff is going to happen all the time. And Mike, to his point from last week, we had Lori Rubinson on, and it's very frustrating, I think, as a Mets fan. She talked about this too, where I'm tired of being told how to enjoy my sports. I'm tired of there being caveats and asterisks around everything that the Mets do, and by proxy, everything that the Met fan can enjoy. Oh, the other one wasn't a real no-hitter because it was clearly a fair ball. You know what? The ball was called foul. It is what it is. What's his name? Armando Galarraga missed out on a perfect game on a blown call that was way more egregious than that one. And no one ever gets up in arms because it went the other way. And so it's frustrating to be told by people who either aren't Mets fans or self-hating Mets fans that are like, oh, well, it's a combined no-hitter, so that doesn't count the same. It's like, can't we just enjoy it? I just want to enjoy our team's prosperity. That's all I want to do.
No, and I mentioned on our podcast, I do think there's some point to the fact that there was 5 pitchers that pitched. I do think you had to rely on 5 different guys to get no hits. That doesn't make it less impressive to me. I mean, it kind of stands out to that point.
Right.
It's only the 17th time in Major League history there's been a combined no-hitter, and there's been 315 no-hitters. So that's more rare than a one-pitcher no-hitter. So, yeah, it doesn't take away from it at all to me. And I know there was a couple of people that tweeted about it and kind of got some traction. And it's just like, yeah, let's just enjoy it. I mean, what's wrong with enjoying what happens? And it's a historic event, and it's only the second no-hitter in Mets history, and we went so long without having one. So why not just enjoy it?
I got something real quick, just because I have to ask both of you in this moment. Now, I know a lot of the pitchers said they had no idea that it was going on. Myself, as a fan watching, I can admit that I didn't realize it was a no-hitter until probably, I'd say, the 6th inning. When did you guys realize Like, when did it start hitting you like, oh my God, this is actually a no-hitter? Because, I'm doing things, I'm watching the game, I'm taking care of my daughter, whatever, I'm doing all these different things. And all of a sudden, like, you're seeing people on base, you're assuming there might have been a hit here, there might have been a hit there, but then you're realizing, like, for me, it was like the 6th inning. I think I might have saw something on Twitter, someone mentioning, like, I'm not going to say it. I'm like, wait a minute. Am I missing something here? Did I miss something? And I look and go, holy shit!
Out of the game.
I go, holy shit! It's a no hitter. So for me, it was like around the 6th inning. When did you guys realize what was potentially happening?
Mike, you go ahead, take it.
Probably the 3rd inning, but that's just because I'm like this freak and I'm constantly tracking stats and more about like the Mets season ERA, McGill's ERA, stuff like that. So. Always constantly looking at the updated box score. So yeah, it was early on, like 3rd inning. I'm like, wait, he hasn't given up a hit yet. And then started, okay, 4th inning. Yeah. And then 5th inning, like, oh, okay, this could be something. And then get to the 6th. I mean, I'm the executive editor, so I run all of the content on the site. So about the 6th inning is when I reached out to the editor that day. I'm like, all right, this is something. This could happen. We need to have content ready. Same way with the social media team. I run all of our social media. So about 6th, 7th inning, I was like, all right, guys, we need to start having some graphics potentially ready, stuff like that. And then some people in both those chats are like, shut up, Mike, don't say anything. But I'm just like, I have to. We have to. We don't want to be scrambling to have an article or a graphic ready. We need to talk about this. So that's when we really started talking about like, what to put in the article, what to put in the graphic, what the title of the article is going to be, that sort of thing. So yeah, then things really start picking up once you get in like the 7th, 8th inning and everyone's scrambling like, all right, we got to make sure we have all of this ready for when it's going to hopefully happen.
It's so funny because when fandom crosses over with professionalism, as does so much nowadays with podcasts and blogs and all this stuff, we're basically all working in the media, and anything is mainstream nowadays. And so you try to like check your fandom at the door. I'm friendly with the social media person at the Mets, and he has the same thing because he's grown up a Mets fan, and he's just like, I mean, it's hard to talk about something like this, but you kind of have to. Like, I have to run it down the chain and be like, hey guys, everything up to snuff, everything ready to go. And it's like, you have to do it. You got to check your fandom for a moment and try to be the pro. To answer the question though, and this comes with a huge caveat. I was working another live event, watching it on my phone, like literally just like hoping that I could like catch glimpses while doing what I needed to do. So I didn't realize it until the event I was working ended, which was about the 7th inning. So and then I was like, oh man. And then everybody was like, oh, John, are you going to come with us? And I was like, no. I need to sit down and watch this. I need to watch the end of this game because nothing else in my world is as important as the Mets potentially pitching a no-hitter now that work is over. So Ibby, I'm like you. I mean, I probably would have realized it sooner if I was sitting down watching the game, but I could not. And listen, I'm just happy that I got to see the final 3 outs. Forget about I saw the final 3 innings, but I would have been satisfied with the final 3 outs. Would have been good enough for me. So that was nice. Which brings us back to Edwin Diaz. And Mike, you said that you track the stats, a big part of what you do. And so I want to talk about Diaz because you alluded to it right at the top. He had a bad year with us the first year. Since then, couple of bumps in the road, but he's been very, very, very good. And I think people are refusing to acknowledge how good Edwin Diaz has been, and can potentially be for the Mets going forward, because I think they're still butthurt about the Brody Van Wagenen deal with Robinson Cano and Jared Kelenic to begin with. And so you dive into the numbers. What do the numbers tell you about Edwin Diaz and how good he's been?
Yeah, I mean, I think it shows you since his first bad year with the Mets, that he's been a top closer in the game. Yeah. And like you said, the trade plays a role in it. Although we're seeing a little bit of that change course now with Kelenic struggling in the major leagues. But there's also this thing where you're talking about fandom. Mets fans just don't ever want to trust a closer. I mean, it doesn't matter how good the closer is. I mean, we had a future Hall of Famer closer in Billy Wagner here, and people still didn't trust him. And I mean, we're in the era of social media, so everything's out there so quickly, and everyone wants to respond and have an emotion to everything so quickly. And they just, even if it's Diaz, unless it's a 1-2-3 inning, fans just, they get nervous. There was a lot of response to my tweet the other day about his 69 saves with the Mets or whatever. And people are like, I don't care. He's still shaky and this type of thing. He's one of the best closers in the league. And he has been for a pretty good span here. We're talking like 2+ years. I think, like I was talking about, I think that moment at the end of the no-hitter, I think that really puts that nail in the coffin for a lot of fans. I think we're starting to see that kind of turn course where fans are like, all right, this is the closer that the Mets have. He's been really good. And I think he's going to be really good. I mean, and I think kind of the way he's dominated this year has changed people's minds too. He's been good in the past couple of years. He's been really good, but just the way he's dominated, I mean, specifically with this slider, his slider has been nearly unhittable this year. It's been one of the best pitches in baseball this year. So to see that, I think fans, to see him just dominate, you're talking about Bryce Harper and JT Realmuto and Riz Hoskins. I mean, you're talking about really good hitters. To see him completely dominate them, and most of the hitters he's faced this year, he's dominated. And like I was talking about with the slider, that's really been that swing and miss pitch for him, like it was back in Seattle.
Yeah, and Ibby, it's funny because, again, Mike dives into the numbers, and so the numbers bear it out. I've been arguing with people on Twitter, and I've just been saying, like, look, he's a top 5 closer in baseball right now. You have to stop comparing everybody and everything that we've ever seen out of the closers to Mariano Rivera. Mariano Rivera was a shooting star. He's the GOAT. You cannot compare everybody who closes baseball games or everybody who closes baseball games in New York to Mariano Rivera. It's simply not fair. And it's weird that Mets closers get compared to Mariano, like as if Mariano was our closer this whole time. Like usually you see that when like the next guy comes up, right? It's like, oh man, you don't want to replace Jeter. That's going to be so hard to do at shortstop. It's like, well, the Mets don't care who replaces Jeter. It didn't matter. So it's funny to me that he gets held to this absurd standard, and he's been electric. And I think that the Mets need to consider extending him, but I don't think they need to necessarily rule out going and getting another bullpen arm that's top flight that has been a closer, because that's what good teams do, because the Mets are going to need another guy in the bullpen. So I think it's weird that people are making that mutually exclusive, like, oh, the Mets are going to have to go out and get a closer. Like the Mets should go out and get somebody who's got closing experience from a bad team. It doesn't mean that they need to kick Edwin Diaz to the curb when they do it. The guy's been great.
Yeah, and I think to your point that I was thinking the same thing. I was going to bring up the whole Mariano Rivera aspect of it. I just think that New Yorkers in general are so used to seeing him on the big stage and in all the games, because again, guy's a Hall of Famer. He's the greatest to ever do it, and he made it look so easy. But guess what? It's not easy, because, like you said, he's a shooting star. He was special, and you look across bullpens and the closer position in general across baseball. It's a fickle position. It really is. It's up and down every year. The consistency is not so much there. I mean, you look around, you see someone like a Josh Hader, that's fine. But outside of that, some guys have ups and downs. It's whatever, but that's the way of the position. That's kind of the way it goes. And the stuff that he's been doing lately is just, like I said to Mike before, it's been straight filth. Like what he's been throwing, like he looks confident out there. He looks like like you said, he looks like the guy that we saw in Seattle when they made this trade initially. Like, people should be backing this guy, because no matter what, he has the stuff. It's all about harnessing it. And to this point, he's been harnessing it. And for where this team wants to go, you have to have something on the back end. I do think that they are going to get more help for the bullpen in general, but that's the guy that's going to be closing these games. And the fact that he's looking the way he does, it makes me as a fan feel good.
Absolutely. Mike, let me ask you, so obviously with the stuff with Trevor May that we found out, the stress reaction, I cannot believe we have 2 guys with stress reactions in their arm when that was an injury that I had never heard of for a pitcher, 2-3 months ago. It's absurd. But so Trevor May's got that injury. Then we look at the inconsistency of a guy like Joely Rodriguez. We look at the fact that, they brought back a guy like Shreve, and Shreve has been mostly good or whatever, but he's not exactly the most lights out guy in the world. Seth Lugo has been up and down. So the Mets are going to have to acquire somebody at some point to be in this bullpen. And I know it's early, but the way that the offseason shook out, there's a lot of bad teams that have decent relief pitching. They're not going to be in the mix a couple months from now because, quite frankly, they're not even in the mix now. So is there anybody that you could think of that would be a target for the Mets that could slot into that either 7th or 8th inning role that would be, somebody the Mets could look at in a couple months?
I mean, I don't have anyone off the top of my head right now, but like you're saying, yeah, with the May injury, that obviously presents a need for the Mets. And he was expected to be one of their back end guys. So with him not being there, and it looks like it's probably going to be a couple of months before we see him again. So, I mean, that's a hurt for the Mets. We saw Adam Ottavino today. He's been mostly good for the Mets, but obviously struggled today. Shreve has probably been their best reliever to this point. Well, besides Drew Smith, of course.
Right.
Drew Smith has been great. Shreve was a great pickup for them to get on a minor league deal. But yeah, they're going to need to find someone. It's still, it's still pretty early. We're in May, and with the way the trade deadline's a little later this year, so that pushes it back to. I think the Mets might get a little creative on waivers to try to see if they can pick up a guy. I mean, they already did it with Yon Lopez and Adonis Medina. They both, obviously, we're talking about higher end arms, hopefully, but they're not afraid to go out on the waiver wire and see if they can pick something up there. And right now they have a 40-man spot open with the DFA of Canó. So it'll be interesting in the next couple of days to week to see if they find something on the waiver wire. Or try to pluck someone from AAA. That's an old Sandy move, picking up a veteran from someone's AAA squad.
Yeah, it's all very possible, all on the table for sure. Ibby, let me ask you about Drew Smith. So, obviously, he's been terrific. And I do think that in the short term, the injury to May does open up the opportunity without hurting anybody else's feelings to maybe give Drew Smith some more. I know he's had a little bit of a crack at it here and there, but some more high leverage innings. So would he be the first guy that you go to to kind of fill that May role, who's sometimes 7th inning, sometimes 8th inning, sometimes 3rd in line closer kind of guy? Would he be the guy you go to?
I feel like he definitely is. And to this point, and I mean, where we are in the season right now, I kind of feel like he was already there almost because of the numbers that he's putting up. And I'm going to bring some numbers here. And obviously I always shout out the guys who give me these numbers. So I'm going to say Matthew Brownstein putting these numbers out, saying how Drew Smith, dating back to August 1st of last year, 17 innings pitched, only giving up 8 hits to 22 strikeouts. The fact that relievers who have struck out 15 or more batters and have not given up a run this season, 3 people: Josh Hader, Ryan Helsley, and Drew Smith. So he's doing things that you want to see. And, I'm not going to sit here and compare him to like what Aaron Luke was doing last year, but the fact is he's becoming that, that pseudo ace out of the pen where you need something to get done. He comes in and he cleans things up and he handles it for you. Pitched the 2 innings yesterday. Like, I think that he is becoming that guy that always comes out of a bullpen in a given year where you're like, if the bullpen breaks right, if this happens, then also there's always that one guy that breaks out and you're like, that's the reason why the bullpen went over the top for that given year. And I think that Drew Smith can be that guy. And I hope that these things continue for him because, like you said, we need help in the bullpen, and having him there replacing May within this instance is nice. I still think we need more. And if I can throw a name out there, because I've been thinking about one. I know everyone always just jumps to the biggest names possible. I think that the Mets should call Arizona, and I think Mark Melanson fits this team. I really do. I think that fits.
I knew you were going to say that. He's the guy I've been thinking about the whole time. Just he's still got really good stuff. He's been a closer before. He's played on basically every single team in baseball, it feels like. I don't know how old he is. He looks ageless. But he's out there on a team that's not going to be good, and he's closing games for him. And it just seems like an obvious fit at the end of the day. Like Mike said, we're far from that now, but it's just something to start to think about, especially with the May injury, because I think the Mets were an arm or two short in the pen to start. And when May goes down, all of a sudden now you're even shorter. Ottavino, again, up and down. Who knows what Joely Rodriguez is? And when you lose a starter the caliber of DeGrom, you lean a little harder on your bullpen anyway, in theory. And so I just think you always want to get another arm in there. Let's bounce it over to the quote-unquote negative. Cano is gone. And it was the right move. It was a move that I did not expect to happen until probably at least another month from now. I thought they would find a creative way to punt this decision a little bit longer. But, I mean, Mike, were you shocked? What were you thinking when it happened, when you saw the news? Robinson Cano DFA'd, the Mets eat $40 million like it ain't even a thing. And to me, that's the coolest part about it. Robinson Cano seems like a decent guy, steroids or whatever aside. I don't care if he does steroids. He's not my teammate. I don't care. But, it's just like, it's nice to see that they could just say, here, take the money and go. Because, the Wilpon Mets, he'd be batting fourth until August. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be your biggest takeaway, right? As a Mets fan, is that Cohen and the Mets, Epler, Showalter, everyone did the right thing regardless of money, right? I mean, that's what you wanted to see. And I think when we first started talking about it like a couple weeks ago, I was like, I mean, come on, this isn't going to happen. Like, they're not going to cut Cano. They're going to wait. Then we saw him only play twice, basically, a week leading up to it. And I'm just like, well, this is the Mets playing the guys that they think they're going to win games. And if Cano's not out there in those situations, their thinking on him has to be changing for them to put him on the bench for 5 of the 7 games that week. So I was kind of less surprised had it happened like a week earlier. But I mean, still, obviously, even if you were thinking about that, you still didn't think it was a slam dunk that Cano was going to get. I mean, we're talking about a guy that without the steroid issues was on a Hall of Fame track.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, obvious, and Lindor came out and talked about it. Starling Marte talked about it. He's a big clubhouse guy. He was well respected in the clubhouse. He did a lot of teaching in the clubhouse. I know going back just a couple of years when Chili Davis was the hitting coach, a lot of guys talked about Cano as like the co-hitting coach because he worked with a lot of the guys. So this is a guy that obviously the players didn't want to go from that respect, but I'm sure those guys are mostly focused on winning and ultimately okay what happened.
Yeah, Ibby, I mean, that was one of the things that we saw. A lot of people were like, well, the teammates love him. The clubhouse loves him. And is that going to be a problem? Is there going to be a breakdown now that he's no longer there? And I think ultimately the players might love him, but I think they'd rather see a meritocracy. You watch a guy like Jankowski come out of nowhere, or, a guy like Guillorme who fills so many roles, or a guy like Dom Smith who, I do think if Dom Smith maybe didn't have that 4-hit game, he's a guy that they could have potentially sent down and moved this decision. But how do you have this guy come out, win a game for you, essentially, pick up 4 hits, and then go, thanks, see you in AAA. We're going to keep Robinson Cano on the roster. Yeah. So, to me, that was the biggest thing. It's merit over a guy who's basically a de facto coach.
Yeah, and I think the thing that stood out to me the most and made me the happiest, because it's something that I've been wanting for the longest time when it came to the front office and how this team is run and how it should have been run for the longest time, and now it's Steve Cohen, we get it, is the fact that he said, make the baseball decision. And when you hear something like that, it's just like, yes, because and look, I think it might have been Sherman who said something, or maybe it was somebody else saying how, Steve Cohen's on Twitter, he hears fans, he wants to do the right thing and all this stuff, but the fact that he says something like that, make baseball decision, because we're all sitting here, we've been saying, it's like, you can't get rid of Jankowski. You can't get rid of JD Davis. You can't get rid of Dom Smith. And even though he was struggling, you're thinking he might be the guy that gets sent down. But is that really the right thing to say? And like you said, once he had the 4 hits, you're like, that's a PR nightmare if you send that guy down and you keep Robinson Cano on this team. So the fact that Dom had that night, I felt even more confident in my thought process based off of what we had been talking about and what we talked about with Laurie. The fact that he got those hits, I said, there is no way that Robinson Cano is going to be on this team come noon tomorrow. There is absolutely no way that they can send somebody else down, because everyone else has versatility. Everyone else has been helping this team in some kind of way. And like Mike alluded to before, the fact that he wasn't playing, that was the writing on the wall. And Dom getting those 4 hits basically closed the door on Cano. The guys might love him. He might have helped them with their swing. He might have been a de facto coach. That's all well and good. But I think in the end, this team wants to win ball games, and they want players that are going to be there to help them do that.
Mike, before we head into the break, let's put a wrap on this talking about some of the other guys who weren't sent down. Now, obviously, certain people out of options, and it's not a possibility, and whatever the case may be, Jankowski fills a role on this team. He's a really good outfielder. He can play all three spots. He's got a speed element. Plus, he's hit. Now, I know he's a journeyman, and I don't expect him to necessarily even be on this team all year, but right now, he deserves to be on this team. You look at Guillorme, he's the only person on the roster that can back up shortstop. Plus, he plays, the two other spots on the infield. He's a plus defender. That's important. Then you flip over to Dom. Had he not gotten those hits, had he not started to get hot, maybe that's a consideration. For me, the other guy that was in the mix was J.D. Davis. Now, I've talked a lot on this show. I don't really like J.D. Davis on this team. I don't think J.D. Davis is a starting caliber player on a team that's trying to go to the World Series, whether it's a DH or elsewhere. I just don't think he's that good. But right now, he's the only right-handed bat off the bench for the Mets. So he pretty much is locked in as a result. But how much leash can the Mets give J.D. Davis? Because and again, I know I say this with some bias because I don't like J.D. Davis as a ball player. But what's your thoughts on him?
J.D., I think he actually does have a role with the Mets. I think with the DH, that allows him to have a role. I mean, he's been one of the Mets' best hitters since they acquired him. He's got a 120 OPS plus. They acquired him. He was one of their best hitters last year with a 126 OPS plus. Obviously, you don't want to see him in the field a ton, and you won't because Escobar is going to play a lot at third. I think he has a role. I do think, once again, getting to the trade deadline, I think obviously the Mets look to upgrade there. Not on Davis, but on the bench in general. Maybe it is Davis. If he struggles, they try to go out and get a right-handed power bat. But I think Davis does have a role. I think it's been a weird spot for Buck to try to get him in playing this year. He hasn't had a streak of games at all. And maybe that obviously makes it easier with Canó gone. And getting back to that a little bit, I think with Dom Smith, I never really thought that the Mets would seriously get rid of him just because of how much he's played at first base. Yeah. I know it's early in the year and everything, but I think the Mets have made it pretty clear that they like Alonso at first, but they like Dom better defensively at first. And that's important for them to be able to have that flexibility to use Dom there and to give Alonso a break and be able to DH. So ultimately, I think that's what it was. It was about flexibility. Dom can stand in left field and right field too. We know Davis can play third, first, and both corner outfield spots. Guillorme can play all the infield spots, and Jankowski can play all three outfield spots. So what can Canó do?
Nothing.
Stand there at second. That was it.
So, I mean, just thinking about it rationally in like that way, as like in baseball terms, it just didn't make any sense to keep Canó. So, yeah, I think obviously they made the right move and they made it for the right reasons. So we'll see how Dom Smith and J.D. Davis, that kind of plays out into the DH role over the next couple of weeks to see who gets more playing time there.
Ibby, I'll give you the final thought on this as we head into the break, because now with Mike, this is 3 guests in a row, not over the span of 3 full weeks, but Mike, Lori Rubinson last week, and Anthony Recker from a few weeks ago or a couple months ago now. Everybody telling me that maybe I'm wrong on J.D. Davis. I don't know. I've met J.D. He's a good dude, and I want to be wrong. I don't know. Am I wrong? Am I wrong about J.D. Davis?
I think what Mike said has merit in the sense of with the DH now, he has a better spot within this team to help. And the one thing that I said when everyone was really high on JD back in 19 when he had the good year, I said that I think JD Davis is an okay player. I think he's a fine player. I just thought that he would be better as a guy that would be coming off the bench. Not so much like putting him in the middle of a lineup as a starter and things like that. So when I saw, when I see him in this role, I think it's more tolerable for me because I think that can allow him to actually succeed as opposed to putting him out at third base and him booting 3 balls and then trying to come in, then he strikes out, and then it's just like it kind of snowballs from there and things like that. So I think with how baseball is now in the NL with the DH, I think he has a better spot. Would I be shocked or upset if they tried to upgrade at that spot? No, I wouldn't. But obviously it depends on what happens come the deadline and how like Mike just said, how he goes about handling the playing time whenever he gets it going forward.
Yeah, I want to turn it into a JD Davis bash fest. I don't hate him. I do think now with Canó being gone,
you hate him. You can't
I hate him
stand him.
a little. It's a little bit. Okay, a little bit. No, I do think he has a very clearly defined role now where, Dom plays most of the time against righties. JD plays most of the time against lefties in some iteration of, whether Dom's at first or DH or whatever it might be. And I think we'll get a better sense of what JD is if he's healthy and he hits, he'll get the opportunity now. I think I'm just angry about, I go back to, I think it was last season when he was 0 for 10 with 10 strikeouts with the bases loaded. That just makes me so upset for a guy who's supposed to get extra base hits, hit for power, and hit lefties. He swings and misses at more mid-90s fastballs from left-handed pitching than I have ever seen in my life. And I just want him to be the masher that he's supposed to be. Yeah. Everybody says that he's some kind of like he crushes lefties. And every time I look up, he's striking out against a lefty who tops out at 89 miles an hour. And it pisses me off. Anyway, that's a good place to leave the conversation. We will head into the break. We'll come back. We'll keep talking Mets. We'll talk about the start. We'll talk about everything else that's going on. This is Till Mets Do Us Part on the Chop Sports Network. John Sapanaro, Matt Ibby Ibanez, and our guest this week, Michael Mayer. We'll be right back. Yo, welcome back to Till Mets Do Us Part here on the Chop Sports Network. John Sapanaro, Matt Ibby Ibanez, and our guest this week, Michael Mayer. Mike, I know Met fans know where they could find you. You're one of the best follows on Twitter, but if anybody's listening to this for the first time or they're watching us on YouTube and they're like, who's this guy? He's got great insight. I want to know where to find his work. Where can they find you? What do you have going on?
All right, so I'm the executive editor at Metsmerizedonline.com. You can find me on Twitter at Mike Mayer 22, and right now we're doing a Metsmerized podcast. You can find that at Metsmerized POD for the podcast, and we also post our YouTube weekly that we just started a couple of weeks ago on there, and we got a bunch of pretty awesome guests lined up coming up. So yeah, check all that stuff out.
Gotta check it out. It's Metsmerized is fantastic. For a long time, it's been my favorite resource. I'm not just saying that because you're on the show now. I've been reading it for a very long time. So it really is great to have you join us and be a part of our show. Let's talk about somebody else who's off to a fantastic start. Somebody who also got a little bit of hate, not for me. This is like the anti-JD Davis conversation for me, because this is somebody who I love that some other people on our show were like, I don't know, man. I don't like this guy. Jeff Mcneil.
I never said I didn't like the guy. I never said
not
that.
You. No, well, it wasn't really you. It was a couple of listen. Anthony Recker was like, I don't know if
this
Anthony Recker on the team.
Anthony Recker ripped them to shreds. I had people. I had multiple people text me on the side like, does Recker hate Mcneil? I'm like, look, that's I didn't ask him. I listened to what he said. Whatever. It is what it is.
If there's anybody who is a guest on this show that hates Jeff Mcneil, we all know it's comedian Chris Frangiola. Chris went so hard at Jeff Mcneil. I was like, dude, are you okay? He actually texted me the other day after Mcneil was batting like 390 against right-handed pitching and was like, I might have been wrong on Jeff Mcneil. I was like, at least you can admit it. So, Mike, obviously we had the curious case of Jeff Mcneil last season where he did not look like the same guy. I was wary of trading a guy like Mcneil because I thought everything he's shown to this point was that he was a professional hitter and that he gave the Mets something that they didn't have, which was excellent bat to ball. And I thought that he would bounce back this year. So far, small sample size, it looks like he has. What's your thoughts overall on Jeff Mcneil?
Yeah, I know the Mets took a bunch of calls on Mcneil, and there was potential trades that they talked. That was mostly involved pitching. The Mets weren't going to deal him for like the perceived value of him coming off that struggle bad year. They weren't going to deal him like that. They were only going to talk to teams that were valuing him like he had been most of his major league career, that type of hitter. So I think there was the possibility of trading him, but I think ultimately the Mets needed someone that they felt was extremely versatile. And we've already seen that with Mcneil this year. He's played a ton at second and left field, and he's looked good there, both defensively. And I think that's kind of the thing that gets missed with Mcneil is that even when he was struggling offensively, he still played second, third, left, and right. and he played all of those positions pretty well defensively. I mean, there's not a ton of guys in Major League Baseball that can do it. I mean, Zobrist used to do it, and you got like a guy like Jake Cronenworth for the Padres that does it a little bit, and there's a couple other guys, but it's pretty rare when you have a guy that can play 4 positions like Mcneil can and play them well defensively. And that's without getting to the bat. I mean, we all knew that Jeff McNeil wasn't the hitter that he showed last year. It was just a matter of what type of hitter you're going to get this year. I think it was interesting to note that McNeil said in Arizona when he hit a ball that he thought was going to go 5-10 rows deep for a home run. And that's when he decided. He's like, nope, I'm going to stop trying to hit for power. I'm just going to hit, and I'm just going to take what I can. I think that, I mean, it's a good thing. Obviously, McNeil's hitting well. He's hitting 337 with an 871 OPS. I think it's interesting that that's how it kind of came about to a point where dead balls are the reason why Jeff McNeil is kind of not swinging for the fences as much. And I honestly don't think swinging for the fences per se was his issue last year. I think it was him. Look, we all know that Jeff McNeil, I don't know how to say this politely, like about McNeil, but he can get inside his own head at times. We see it with the F-bombs constantly after making outs and stuff. I just think he kind of got himself in a position where he had started off so bad last year and then just got into a spot where he was tinkering all the time trying to perfect it. And he just constantly tinkering with stuff. Nothing worked. And it just snowballed on him. And where he kind of had that attitude of just kind of blaming himself of what was going on. I think everything kind of snowballed on him last year. And ultimately we're seeing Jeff McNeil and we're seeing him in a spot where he's not like relied on to be the number 2 hitter or the number 3 hitter this year. He's hit up there a little bit, but I mean, he's hit anywhere from 6th to 8th too, where he's back of that lineup. He's not one of the key guys that they're really relying on to drive this offense. And I think that kind of helps him relax to the point of where he can just be Jeff McNeil. I know right now it's mostly he's taking his singles and stuff, but hey, Jeff McNeil ultimately made it to the major leagues because of the power he showed in Double-A. And I don't think that's going to go. Obviously, he's not showing it a ton right now. The Mets aren't showing much power as a team at all.
They're not.
So I think once we get some warmer temperatures and maybe a better baseball, I think you're going to see the Mets show some more power anyway. And I think Jeff's the guy. He's still going to have some power, but be that Jeff McNeil that can hit for power, but also drop down that bunt or slap it through that shortstop hole too.
Yeah, look, Ibby and I both love Jeff McNeil as a ball player and what he can contribute. So I don't think we have much to add in terms of, what he's done so far this season at the moment. But it's funny that you brought it up a few times, Mike, because Ibby, I'll just send it to you first. It was going to be the next topic of conversation. The Mets' lack of power and or the MLB's inability to get the baseball right. And I know these balls are made by hand, Ibby. I get there's a tradition of rubbing them with dirt by the clubhouse director, and they want to put the balls in the humidor so that, things aren't crazy like they were a few years ago. But whether it's the ball being deadened and or pitchers not being able to get a grip on balls, I mean, what is the MLB doing? Like, Ibby, what are they doing? Just get it consistent. Just get a ball that's got a little grit to it already. Like, just do it. I don't understand. I don't understand.
I don't even know how to really respond and answer the question at hand, because it's so ridiculous and preposterous to me, because it's like you're hearing what Chris Bassett said. Obviously, you're seeing what's gone on to the Mets and across baseball, whatever, and I don't understand why we're trotting out there with 3 different balls and it's a different ball every inning. It's this, it's that. It's like one ball, get a universal grip. I don't care what the hell it is. Make the seams better. Like I don't know what needs to be done, but just make something universal, stick with it, and that's it. Why? Yeah. It's incredible to me how baseball can never get out of its own way. It makes so much money, but they can never get out of their own way. One ball, and go. That's it.
Go ahead, Mike.
So I've talked to some of the Mets minor leaguers that pitched Arizona Fall League last year, and in the Arizona Fall League, they pre-tacked ball. So basically, kind of like what you're talking about, so that they're pre-broken in a little bit. They get pre-tacked so you can get a good grip on them. And every single ball that you use is that way. All the pitchers I talked to said it was great for them. They didn't have any issues with it whatsoever. It was better than going between, I mean, obviously in the minors and the majors, they keep going in between trying different balls. I think that's what they ultimately have to do, is go to this pre-tacked ball that is as much the same as you can get it every single time. And so that you have more consistency. We heard Chris Bassett. I mean, he put it out there. I mean, you can't go one inning to the next inning with a completely different grip on a ball. So if you're pre-tacking all these balls, that should hopefully eliminate the huge differences between them.
Yeah, and I know you were talking about it from a dead end ball perspective on the offensive side, and we kind of inadvertently switched the conversation to the pitching side, but I think both have merit. I mean, even a guy like Buck Showalter comes out who's been around baseball his entire life, and he says, I think some of the pitchers probably took it a little too far with the sticky substances and how they were able to use that to their advantage to get crazy high spin rates and all the stuff that we saw from a couple of years ago, all the spider tack incident things. But there needs to be some kind of ability for these pitchers to grip. And even to Tyler Glasnow's injury, I don't know if removing sticky stuff is the reason why he blew out his elbow 2 starts later. But Mike, I got to think there's something to all of this, right? Like, if we've all been in a situation where, like, you're tossing around a ball and then all of a sudden you get one that feels a little different. Like, it does feel different, and none of us are major leaguers throwing at max effort trying to hit 97 miles an hour on the corner with it. We're just tossing it around. We're like, wow, this one feels different, doesn't it? So I just think offensively, defensively, something's got to be done. And I also think that, I don't know if you could speak to this, but I think the humidor was done with a little bit too much haste. I think the humidor has like a universal settings, basically. And now you're looking at it going like, I don't know, does New York need the same settings as Chicago? I know the ones in Coors Field and Arizona and the places that have had it for a while, their settings are more exclusive, but it just seems as though it's a simple thing of just get the ball right, and MLB can't get the ball right. I'm at a loss.
Well, and the crazy thing is about what we're seeing as a deadened ball now is that most of all of the rule changes that Major League Baseball has implemented and are trying to implement are all to create more offense, but yet they're deadening the ball. So what are we doing here? Like, you have to pick and choose what you're trying to do. If you want more offense and you're going to implement rules that help the offense, which a lot of the rules have, then why are we deadening the ball? We could go like a couple of hours talking about what we don't like about Rob Manfred and his time.
Easily.
We could talk about that for a while, but this is just one of the issues. I mean, we know just in his short time as the commissioner that, I mean, there's been studies on the balls. They've constantly changed. They boosted the balls one year and we saw a ton of home runs, and now they've deadened the balls. So, I mean, just be consistent. It really shouldn't be that hard. Be consistent to the point of just the human error, like we were talking about, where they hand make the balls. That should be the only thing. And that's not a big deal. It's just a small difference each way, but be consistent every year with how you're making the ball and to what specifications every year.
Yeah, I just really wish it was that simple. I mean, we're 3 people talking to each other on a computer screen, and yet Rob Manfred just can't stop tinkering with the baseball, among other things with our beautiful sport. But whatever, like you said, that's another conversation for another day. Brings me to a guy, I think the dead end ball plays a role. I also think some bad luck plays a role. Ibby, I'll throw it to you first because I know where you're going to go with this. You and I are in agreement most of the time when it comes to this guy, Francisco Lindor. He's in I think it's 0 for 14 or 0 for 15 slump that probably shouldn't be that bad. I mean, the guy's hit a lot of balls on the screws over this over, and also over the course of the season that haven't gone his way, either because the ball didn't quite carry or because it had an expected batting average of 850 and somebody winds up making a great catch on it or something like that. But yet there's Mets Twitter, kind of like what we were talking about with Edwin Diaz, dumping on Lindor, when I will say this till the day this show no longer exists or I die, whatever happens first. From May 28th of last season through the end of the year, Francisco Lindor's numbers were in line with his career numbers, period. Francisco Lindor's good. He's a star. Why is people making it sound like he's terrible at baseball?
I'm going to tell you why. It's because Mets fans do not know how to handle a winning team. And I say that, no, it's true though. It's true. They don't understand winning in terms of, teams have ups and downs, but you're still winning games. It is what it is, whatever. We're talking about, they're 6-4 in their last 10. Okay. They haven't lost a series yet. Sure. Lindor struggling a little bit. Am I worried? No, because he came out of the chute hot. There was no issues. It seemed as though he was more comfortable. I still think he's comfortable. This is baseball. Okay. If you can get a hit every time, people would, but you can't. Okay. I have no issue with what's going on with him. I have no worries with what's going on with him. I'm confident that he'll turn it around, and that the offense in general will turn around. But if there's one thing, actually, no, forget that. I won't even say that part. I want to go to this part instead. When it comes to the Met fan in general, because I said to you, I wanted to hit on this. And when it comes to the winning aspect, I think that the fact that it was Saturday's game. I was at Saturday's game. And this is going off on a little bit of a tangent, but I have to get it in. And I want to do one with Mike here as well.
Do it.
The fact that this team was 2-1. It was a bit of a slow game, bit of a slog, not a lot of offense going on. And this is kind of off Lindor too, but just the offense in general. And the Met fan, 2-1, right? 2-1. And I'm looking around and people are doing the wave. And that bothers me. And this goes beyond the whole ban the wave thing. It does. But just looking at it, it's like there's ups and downs within a game, and it's 2-1, and you're trying. All this comes back to the Mets fan not knowing, understanding winning, or trying to stay focused. It's just like everyone's doing the wave now. It's like it's 2-1, and I'm pretty sure Lindor was up. I think Lindor was up when this is happening, and everyone's doing the wave. It's like this is a good game. It's 2-1. We're in a big spot here. The guy you're booing or you're bitching about on Twitter is up, and you're doing the wave. You're not even focused. So it's just like it's the idea of not understanding winning. It's not being able to handle it. But in terms of Francisco Lindor himself, I have no worries. I've been a Francisco Lindor fanboy on this podcast since day one, and I will continue until the day I die or this show ends. Like you said, whichever one comes first, Francisco Lindor is a damn good hitter. There he is. Respect him.
Mike, before I bounce it to you, I just want to say that I also hate the wave so much so that when I'm hosting, when I'm out hosting for Monster Jam and there's a real lull in the action, and my AV manager is like, John, you got to start the wave. I'm like, no, I won't do it. I don't care. I was like, I won't start the wave under any circumstances in any situation ever. I will not do the wave. Pick something else. I will not do it. That's how anti the wave I am. I will put my job in jeopardy to not do the wave. Mike, let's bring it back to Lindor. If you want to chime in on the wave too, you certainly can. But your forte is the numbers. Like you said, you really dive into it with these guys. So when it comes to Lindor, I mean, what do the numbers show you on Lindor just this season? I just want to talk about this season where everybody talks about, and now I'm worried because he's in an 0 for 15.
No, yeah, I mean, I'm not worried about him. Like you said, he's hit, going back to Arizona, he hit some balls that probably would have went out most years, and he's had a couple of those this year. Just pure numbers, his expected slugging percentage is .466 this year, which is the best for him going back until 2018. So, yeah,
huge year.
His expecting batting average is .274. Again, the best of the last 3 years. His weighted on base average is .342, the best in the last 4 years. So no, I'm not worried about Francisco Lindor. He's gonna go through spells like this. I think we could go back to Mets fans and get on a rampage about this, about how they feel about streaks. Mm-hmm. The issue is every major league hitter goes through hot streaks and cold streaks. Mm-hmm. It's not a talent-based thing. Good hitters do it. Mike Trout does it. Everyone goes through streaks. Lindor is going through a bad streak right now. He's hit the ball pretty hard in a lot of these games still. So yeah, like I talked about with his expected stats, they're higher than what his actual stats are. So he's a guy that's going to go out and he's going to get his hits. I mean, over the last, we're almost at a calendar year now that he's basically been Francisco Lindor.
Yeah. May 28th
exactly.
is the number. Yeah.
Yeah. We're basically there. I mean, look, Carlos Beltran did the same thing. He struggled to start his Mets career. He's going to go into the Hall of Fame someday soon. So Francisco Lindor, he struggled to start. Yeah, it's New York. He got a massive extension. Like, there was a lot put on his shoulders. It is what it is. And kind of to get to like the fandom part of it with Lindor, I think there's a lot of fans pretty much no matter what Lindor does outside of hitting like a walk-off home run in Game 7 of the World Series that is never going to fully support him because he gets 10 years, $340 million. There's just
why?
It doesn't make any sense.
I know that, but you see it in my replies, and then you see it like when they're talking about like Juan Soto's contract of him potentially getting $500,000, and you see these other guys get these contracts that are big numbers, but they're not really compared to what the owners are making now. But that doesn't change some fans' thought process, and no guy should ever get $340 million to play a game. Well, he should. He's one of the best at his position, so that's what he's getting paid. So that's over and done with. Can we just focus on what he's doing? And right now, he's tied for 8th in the National League with 1.1 WAR by Fangraphs. So yeah, he's been one of the best players in the National League. And that's even with him struggling a little bit defensively here and there this year. So I think, yeah, I'm fine with Lindor. He's going to be good the rest of this year, and he's going to be good for a long stretch.
Yeah, listen, you're saying it, and that is that. If I could just clip one moment of this episode and say, "Hey, fans, just listen to this," it's everything you just said about Lindor. Because I don't know, Ibby, I think if you look at it with your eyes and you just watch a guy play baseball, and you've watched as much baseball as the three of us have in our lives, you don't have to be a scout to go, that guy's damn good at baseball. And then if you look at the numbers that Mike just threw out there, you go, well, that guy's damn good at baseball. Like, I don't think that there's any other way to describe Francisco Lindor. And it's frustrating to me, the money aspect. We talked a lot about it during the lockout with former players about, how they need to make money and it's just market value and all of that. So I don't want to drudge that back up. I just want to say, Mets fans, like, you can't have it both ways. Ibby, we wanted so much to have an owner that would spend and go out and sign guys to $300 million contracts and sign guys $30 million a year and $40 million a year. And we laughed about Jeff Wilpon about how he said, well, how many $30 million guys could we have on the roster? And Steve Cohen's like, 2. I got it. We'll probably get another one too, because I don't really care. It ain't tricking if you got it. It doesn't matter. So like, Met fans wanted that. You wanted to go get guys like Lindor. You were mad we couldn't be in the market for Machado and Harper when they were free agents. Everybody's salivating over Judge or Juan Soto. These guys cost a lot of money. Once they get a lot of money and come here, you can't be mad about it. You can't have it both ways.
The fact
so, you know what? Go sign Jason Bay and just be happy with that. When it doesn't work, and then when it doesn't work out, we're like, we can never sign a free agent again because we gave Jason Bay 4 years, 12 friggin' years ago.
It's incredible because Mike, you're spot on when you say, because I see those replies too, because yes, I mean, going into the comments is always the wrong thing to do. It's never the right thing to do, but sometimes you do it. And then, the fact that you're right when people, and I see it in like Facebook groups too, which is another cesspool in itself, but just seeing people who won't support a guy just because of the contract. And that is incredible to me because guess what? He's on your team. So why the hell wouldn't you want this guy to succeed? Francisco Lindor is one of the stars of this game, and he is a New York Met for the next 10 years. Mr. Smile, everything about him leading up to him coming to New York, everything that he did in Cleveland, he was the epitome in my eyes. And this isn't just because he's a Met now, but everything he did on the field, what everyone wants baseball to be, fun. This is what this guy has always brought to the table, and he's ours. And the fact that people do not like him, I have a problem with you. So I do not care if you listen to the show or not. I have a problem with you because if you don't like this guy, I don't know what you want in a baseball player. I really don't. Francisco Lindor is a star. 0 for 15, don't care. He's going to be fine. He's hitting the ball hard this year. Last year, the beginning of the season, you could tell, I said this multiple times, he was flaring out. His ass was going out. He was weak. He was all arms. He wasn't hitting the ball hard. He's hitting the ball hard. He's barreling it up. I am not worried about him, and you should not be worried about him either. Support the guy, please.
He's going to for a decade. Even after Grit Barrett, you should probably support him because there's 10 more years of this. Anyway, we got to get out of here in a second. One thing that we like to do, we like to end every show with final thought, something that we didn't necessarily get the opportunity to get to. I know the guest, and I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but you can go ahead and go first with it. Anything, just if you just had to, in a perfect world, say whatever you wanted to about the Mets right now in this moment. I don't care if it's about a specific player, anything at all that you want to let our listeners know about. Take it away.
Wow, you really are putting me on the spot. Yeah,
I mean, I'll go first if you want, but
no, it's fine. I think I couldn't go the whole show without mentioning the minor leagues because that's where my real passion is and everything. And we've also kind of talked about what the Mets would do with Trevor May out, trade deadline, stuff like that. So what I wanted to kind of do is touch on a couple of different bullpen arms that we might see from the minor leagues going forward. One arm is Colin Holderman, who we saw during spring training a little bit. He had some good outings. He had some bad outings in spring. He's pitched well for Syracuse to start the year in high leverage spots. We saw him up to 100 in spring. He's been mostly 97, 98 this year. He's in AAA Syracuse, so I think he would be one of the first arms we see. And then I want to jump down to Binghamton, where they have two guys that are throwing 100 plus. Bryce Montez Dioka, who has been through, I think when I talked to him this offseason, he's been through 6 surgeries and is finally healthy now. He's throwing 100. He's throwing a cutter at 94. He's got 15 strikeouts in 8 innings this year for Binghamton as their closer. He's looked great. He's the type of guy that he's funky. He's like 6'7". He's all arms coming at you. And 100. He's a guy to keep an eye on. If he can control his fastball and his cutter, which has been an issue, he does have 5 walks this year. He's the type of guy that we're going to see at some point at Citi Field. So, and then another guy, the other guy that's been closing for the Binghamton Rebel Ponies is Mcneill. He hit 102 the other day. And he picked up a save that day. He's got 2 saves. I think this is another guy to kind of keep Mets fans keep their eyes on. So Colin Holderman, Bryce Montez Dioka, and Mcneill Otanez, those are the 3 guys that we could see pretty soon. And then one last name to plug. I posted a video of him today, is Josh Hedgeka, the submariner, just because I have a soft spot for submarine guys. And this offseason, he learned how to throw the rising slider. And he's been great so far. He hasn't given up a run in 9 innings, and he's in AA right now.
That is a great list of guys when we talk about, who can potentially fill injury, ineffectiveness from a guy like Trevor Williams that we didn't even talk about and stuff like that. Great stuff. Ibby, what do you got for a final thought?
The only thing I want to say is obviously thank you, Mike, for coming on. I've been wanting to get you on for a while. I've been following your stuff for a long time, so thank you so much for coming on, all the content that you put out, because a lot of times when I'm bringing stats to the table, whether it's your stuff and I mention you or Matthew Brownstein or Timothy Ryder, always putting out great content on Twitter. And with good content, or I should say great content, I also want to say thank you for being the number one source when it comes to Tsuyoshi Shinjo highlights, because I need those in my life. So when I see him coming out on a goddamn spaceship or whatever it might be, or a smoke show, and I know who's posting it, it's Michael Mayer. So thank you for the things that you do.
Yeah, man. Big boss Shinjo doing work. I think Chris Frangiola